It was a freezing cold night, just before closing time at the pizza shop. An old, hungry veteran came to the door and said he had no money. I gave him the last pizza of the night for free. The next morning, my tiny apartment was surrounded by military-style jeeps, and the same old man stepped out, wearing the immaculate, decorated uniform of a 4-star general. Before we get into the details, I'd love to know, what city are you watching from today? And be sure to subscribe for our daily stories. Okay, let's head to that late-night pizza shop. The last hour of the graveyard shift at a highway-side pizza parlor is one of the loneliest places on Earth. The clock on the wall seems to tick backwards, each minute an eternity of wiping down sticky tables and staring out the large, plate glass window at the endless dark river of headlights on the interstate. My life, for the past 2 years, had been a series of these lonely hours. Ever since my parents had passed, it had been just me and my younger sister, Riley. I had dropped out of community college to take this job, to keep a roof over our heads, to make sure she had a chance at the future I had been forced to put on hold. I was 20 years old, but some days I felt ancient. Tonight was particularly slow, a cold, bitter Tuesday in November. I had just finished cleaning the last of the ovens and was counting down the final 10 minutes before I could lock the doors and begin the long bus ride home. That's when the bell above the door chimed, a small, lonely sound in the empty shop. The man who stood there was old, thin, and carried with him the profound, unshakable weariness of a long and difficult life. He was wearing a faded, olive-green M65 field jacket, the kind I had seen in old war movies, and his face was a road map of wrinkles. His eyes a pale, watery blue that seemed to hold a universe of sadness. "Excuse me, son," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. "Are you still open?" "Just about to close up, sir," I replied, my professional customer service smile clicking into place. "But I can still make you a pie if you're hungry." He looked up at the menu board, his eyes scanning the prices, and I saw his shoulders, which were already slumped with exhaustion, seem to sink a little further. "Ah," he said, a look of quiet, profound embarrassment on his face. "Ah, I see. I'm afraid I've miscalculated my funds. I'm so sorry to have wasted your time." He turned to leave, but there was something in the way he held himself, a quiet, broken dignity, and the way his gaze had lingered on the hot, fresh cheese pizza sitting under the heat lamp on the counter, a pizza that a customer had ordered an hour ago and never came to pick up. My boss, a man whose heart was as cold as a walk-in freezer, had a strict rule: all unclaimed orders were to be thrown out, and the cost was to be docked from the pay of whoever was on shift. That $10 pizza was for me an hour and a half of work. It was the money I needed for Riley's field trip next week. But then I looked at the old man, at the faded military jacket and the deep, hungry sadness in his eyes, and I thought of my own grandfather, who had served in Vietnam and had come home a quiet, haunted man. I made a choice. "Sir," I called out, my voice a little too loud in the empty shop. He turned. "You know what?" I said, improvising. "That pizza on the counter, the large pepperoni. The guy who ordered it never showed up. My boss just told me to throw it out. It would be a shame for it to go to waste." It was a lie, of course. It was a cheese pizza, but it was a kind lie. I said, putting the pizza in a box and walking it over to him. "Please, take it. It's yours."
He just stared at me for a long moment, his watery blue eyes searching my face. He took the box, his hand trembling slightly. "You didn't have to do that, son," he whispered. "Everyone needs a hot meal on a cold night," I said with a shrug. I looked down at the worn collar of his jacket. "Thank you for your service, sir." The old man's entire posture seemed to change. He stood up a little straighter, and a new, different kind of light came into his eyes, a flicker of a man he had once been. "What's your name, son?" he asked, his voice now a little stronger. "Sean," I replied. "Well, Sean," he said, giving me a single, firm nod of profound respect, "it seems this country has not forgotten its manners after all. I will not forget this." He turned and walked out into the cold, dark night. The warm pizza box fell in his hands. I locked the door behind him, a strange mixture of feelings swirling in my chest. I felt good for having done a kind thing, but I also felt the familiar, cold dread of knowing that my already thin paycheck was now going to be $10 lighter. I had no idea that the simple $10 act of kindness I had just performed, an act I had already written off as a loss, was about to become the single greatest and most profitable investment of my entire life. I walked home through the cold, deserted streets after my shift, the weight of a long night's work settling into my bones. The $10 I had paid my boss for the unclaimed pizza was a significant loss, a small but painful dent in my already fragile budget. It meant the difference between a full week of groceries and a few days of instant noodles. But as I replayed the look on the old veteran's face, the profound, almost shocked gratitude in his eyes, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Some things, I thought, were just more important than money. My small apartment was quiet and dark, save for the small nightlight in the hallway. I peeked into my little sister Riley's room. She was asleep, her breathing a soft, steady rhythm in the silence, her face peaceful in the pale glow of the moonlight. She was the reason for all of it, the long hours, the aching feet, the constant grinding worry. She was my entire world, and my one solemn promise to my parents was that I would take care of her, that I would give her a better life than the one I was currently living. I ate a bowl of plain oatmeal for my late-night dinner, a meal that had become a familiar, if joyless, friend, and finally collapsed into my own bed, my mind a weary blur. The next morning began like any other. I woke up before the sun, made a quiet breakfast for myself, and a proper one of scrambled eggs and toast for Riley. I helped her with her homework, a report on the solar system, and I listened as she chattered excitedly about her day at school. It was in these small, normal moments that I found my joy. My phone buzzed with a text message from my boss. "Hey, Sean, just saw on the security footage you gave away that pie last night, docking the $10.99 from your check. Don't let it happen again." I just sighed and put the phone down. There was no point in arguing. In his world, kindness was a liability, a line item on a loss report. I just had to work harder. It was just as I was helping Riley put on her coat to walk her to the bus stop that we heard it. It was not the familiar sound of our neighborhood's morning traffic. It was a low, deep, and powerful rumble, the sound of heavy engines where they did not belong. I walked to the window and looked out, and my blood ran cold.
Two massive, black and vaguely military-looking SUVs, the kind you only see in movies, were pulling up directly in front of our small, run-down apartment building. They moved with a slow, deliberate, and deeply intimidating purpose, their tinted windows reflecting the gray morning sky like the eyes of some great black beast. The entire, usually bustling street seemed to fall silent. Neighbors were peering out from behind their curtains, their faces full of a fearful, nervous curiosity. "Wow," Riley whispered from beside me. "Who are they?" "I don't know, sweetie," I said, my own voice a tight, strained thing. My first and only thought was that I was in some kind of trouble, the kind of trouble I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I grabbed my sister's arm and pulled her away from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. The doors of the SUVs opened in perfect, silent unison. 4 men in sharp, dark, and perfectly tailored suits emerged. They were not soldiers in fatigues, but they moved with the same disciplined, efficient grace. They had earpieces. They scanned the street, their gazes sweeping over the building, over my window with a cool, professional intensity that made my skin crawl. They formed a quiet, imposing perimeter around the vehicles. And then the rear passenger door of the lead vehicle opened. A young man in a military dress uniform, a Marine, I thought, stepped out. He stood at perfect, ramrod-straight attention and opened the door as if for royalty. A single, loud and deeply authoritative knock echoed from my front door. I stood frozen in the middle of my small living room, my arm a protective shield in front of my little sister, Riley. The single, authoritative knock on our apartment door echoed in the sudden, terrifying silence. My mind raced, a frantic, chaotic scramble for an explanation. The police? The FBI? Who were these men? What could I have possibly done? My life was a simple, grinding routine of work and home, of trying to be both a brother and a parent to the only family I had left. There were no dark secrets, no hidden crimes. "Sean, who is it?" Riley whispered, her small body trembling behind me. "I don't know, sweetie," I whispered back, "but it's going to be okay. Stay here." I took a deep, steadying breath, a silent prayer on my lips, and I walked to the door. I peered through the small, fish-eyed peephole. All I could see was the chest of an impossibly large man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit. This was not a social call. With a hand that was not entirely steady, I turned the deadbolt and opened the door a crack. The man in the suit did not speak. He just looked at me with a pair of cool, impassive eyes. And then he did something I did not expect. He stepped aside, his movement as crisp and as precise as a soldier's drill. And then I saw him. The rear door of the lead SUV, the one that had been opened by the uniformed Marine, was now empty. And walking slowly, deliberately, up the short, cracked concrete path to my run-down apartment building was the old man from the pizzeria. But it was not the same man.
The stooped, shivering, and deeply sad figure from the night before was gone. In his place was a man who stood ramrod straight, his back as rigid as a steel beam, his every movement radiating a quiet, powerful, and utterly unshakable authority. The faded olive-green field jacket had been replaced by the most immaculate, dark blue dress uniform I had ever seen. The chest of the jacket was a brilliant, dazzling constellation of medals and ribbons, a testament to a lifetime of courage and conflict. And on each of his broad, powerful shoulders were 4 gleaming silver stars. My brain simply refused to connect the two images, the hungry, broke, and forgotten old veteran from the night before, and the 4-star general who was now standing on my doorstep. It was not possible. And yet, it was happening. He stopped in front of me. The men in suits stood at a respectful, silent attention behind him. "Mr. Riley," he began, and his voice was not the raspy, weak whisper I remembered. It was a deep, commanding baritone, the voice of a man who was used to giving orders and having them obeyed without question. "We meet again. May we come in?" I was too stunned to speak. I just nodded dumbly and stepped back, holding the door open. He walked into my small, humble living room, his presence so large, so powerful, that he seemed to suck all the air out of the space. He looked around, taking in the worn-out sofa, the second-hand furniture, the framed school photograph of Riley on the wall. His gaze was not judgmental. It was analytical, observant. He then turned to me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of the kind, sad old man from the night before in his sharp, intelligent eyes. "My name is General Thomas Wallace," he said, his voice now a little softer. "Retired. and I believe I owe you an explanation." He told me his story. He spoke of a lifetime of service, of battles fought, of men lost. And he spoke of the quiet, lonely war that had begun after he had taken off his uniform for the last time. "I have been having a difficult time, son," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble of a profound and deeply personal pain. "After a lifetime of purpose, I find myself in a world I no longer recognize, a world that seems to have forgotten the meaning of respect, of service, of simple human decency." He explained that in his moments of deepest despair, he would sometimes conduct what he called reconnaissance missions. He would put on his old field jacket and walk the streets of the cities he had once sworn to protect. He was not looking for charity, he was looking for character. He was testing a theory, a dark, cynical theory, that the country he had fought for had lost its soul. "And then," he said, his piercing blue eyes locking with mine, "I met you. I walked into your shop, a hungry old man, and I gave you a story of loss and hardship. And you, Mr. Riley," he said, a slow, profound smile spreading across his face, "in a single selfless act of pure, unadulterated kindness, you proved my entire cynical theory wrong. You didn't just give a hungry man a pizza, you looked a soldier in the eye and you showed him respect at your own personal expense when you had absolutely nothing in the world to gain from it. You reminded me," he said, his voice now thick with an emotion I could not name, "what we were fighting for in the first place. I do not forget a kindness, son," the general continued, his voice now a low, powerful command once more. "I have had my staff do a bit of research on you this morning. I know about your sister. I know about your struggles. I know about your dream of becoming a paramedic."
He then nodded to the young Marine who had been standing silently by the door. The Marine stepped forward, holding a thick, official-looking manila envelope. "And I am here," the general said, taking the envelope, "to make you a proposition." He placed the heavy, important-looking envelope on my small, rickety coffee table. I stared at it, then back at the legendary four-star war hero who was standing in the middle of my living room. My life of late nights and greasy pizza boxes and a constant grinding worry was over. A new, terrifying, and unbelievably different kind of future was sitting on my table, sealed in a manila envelope, and I had no idea what was inside. I stood there in the doorway of my own small apartment, my mind struggling to reconcile the two realities that were now standing before me. The first was the man from the night before, a frail, shivering, and forgotten old soldier. The second was the man here now, a towering, powerful, and legendary four-star general, surrounded by an entourage of men who looked like they could topple governments. It did not compute. "May we come in?" he had asked. I could only nod, a dumb, speechless gesture, and step back, opening the door to my humble, slightly cluttered living room. He walked in, his presence so large, so full of a quiet, coiled energy that the small room seemed to shrink around him. The young Marine and one of the men in suits followed him inside. The others remained outside, silent sentinels by the black SUVs. The general looked around my apartment. His eyes, sharp and analytical, took in everything. The stack of overdue bills on the small kitchen table, the worn-out second-hand sofa, the framed photograph of my smiling 10-year-old sister, Riley, on the bookshelf. His gaze was not judgmental. It was assessing. He was a man gathering intelligence, reading the story of my life in the simple, honest details of my poverty. "Please," he said, gesturing to the sofa, "sit." It was a request, but it had the unmistakable weight of a command. We all sat. He then, with a calm, deliberate clarity, told me the truth. He explained his reconnaissance missions into the civilian world. He spoke of his profound disappointment with the greed, the disrespect, the lack of honor he so often found. I was beginning to believe the country I had fought for, the country my friends had died for, was gone, he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble of a deep and profound sorrow. I was beginning to believe that its heart had gone cold. He then looked at me, his gaze intense. And then I met you, Sean. I came to you, a hungry old man with a story of loss, and I offered you nothing. And you, a young man with your own clear struggles, a young man who could not afford it, you gave me everything you had to give in that moment. You gave me your food. But more than that, he leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. You gave me your respect. You looked a soldier in the eye and you thanked him for his service. You, a stranger, showed me a decency that I have not seen from some of my own colleagues in the Pentagon. He leaned back, a slow, profound smile spreading across his face. You reminded me that the heart of this country is not in its boardrooms or its halls of power. It is here, in small, quiet rooms like this, with good, decent young men like you. He then nodded to the young Marine, his aide, who was still standing silently by the door. The aide stepped forward, holding the thick, official-looking manila envelope he had been carrying.
"I do not forget a kindness, son," the general continued, his voice now taking on a new, purposeful tone. "And I do not believe in wasting good soldiers. I had my staff do a bit of research on you this morning. I know about your sister, Riley. I know about your parents. I know you dropped out of college to take care of her. And I know," he said, a new sharp light in his eyes, "that your dream was to become a paramedic." He took the envelope from his aide and placed it on my small, rickety coffee table. The gesture was so deliberate, so full of a weight I could not comprehend, that it felt like he had just placed a bar of gold there. "That envelope," he said, "is a formal proposition from a private foundation I established years ago. It is called the Wallace Foundation for Civic Duty. It is not a charity, it is an investment fund. We invest in character. We find promising young people, people with grit, with integrity, with a sense of service, and we give them the tools they need to build a better life, not just for themselves, but for their communities." My heart was hammering against my ribs. I stared at the envelope, at my own name typed neatly on the front, and I could not breathe. "Inside that envelope," the general said, his voice a low, powerful boom that seemed to shake the very foundations of my small apartment, "you will find a formal offer. It is a full 4-year scholarship to the state's top paramedic and firefighter training academy. The scholarship covers all tuition, books, and includes a generous monthly stipend for your living expenses, a stipend that is more than enough to ensure that both you and your sister Riley are taken care of for the entire duration of your training." I just stared at him, my mind a complete white void of disbelief. It was a dream, an impossible waking dream. I can't," I finally whispered, the words a choked, pathetic sound. "Sir, General, I can't. It's too much. I just gave you a pizza." The general's expression hardened, but not with anger. It was the look of a commanding officer dealing with a young, stubborn recruit. "This is not about the pizza, son," he said, his voice firm. "The pizza was just the test. This is about who you are. I do not give handouts. I make investments. And after watching you, after learning about you, I believe that you are the single best investment I will make this entire year." He stood up, his powerful frame seeming to fill the entire room. "This is not a gift for you to refuse. This is not an offer. It is an order. You will accept this scholarship. You will go to that academy. You will graduate at the top of your class. And you will spend your life running towards the fire, not away from it. You will spend your life serving others, as you were so clearly and so beautifully born to do.
Is that understood, soldier?" I looked at him, at this legendary, terrifying, and unbelievably magnificent old man, and I saw in his eyes a faith in me that I had never even had in myself. The tears I had been holding back finally came, tears of a gratitude so profound, so overwhelming, it was a physical pain. "Yes, sir," I managed to choke out. Understood." He gave me a single, firm nod of satisfaction. He then walked to the door, his entourage of silent, powerful men falling into step behind him. At the door, he paused and turned back, a rare, small, and almost warm smile on his face. "One more thing, son," he said. "I find myself in need of a good sparring partner for my weekend chess games. My last one, a colonel, was a terrible player. Report to my home address, which you will find in that folder, on Saturday, 0800 hours. He looked me up and down. "And don't be late."
I watched as the black SUVs pulled away, leaving my quiet street in a state of stunned, silent disbelief. I was left standing in the middle of my small, humble living room, holding an envelope that contained my entire, rewritten future. I had started the day a broke, exhausted, and hopeless pizza delivery guy. Now I was a scholarship recipient, a future paramedic, and apparently the new, unwilling chess partner of a 4-star general. My old life was over, and my new, terrifying, and unbelievably bright future had just been given its first and most impossible order. I stood in the middle of my small, shabby living room, the heavy, official-looking envelope from the Wallace Foundation clutched in my hand. The profound, authoritative silence left by the general and his entourage was slowly replaced by the familiar sounds of my life, the hum of our old refrigerator, the distant traffic on the street below. But everything was different. The very air in the room felt changed, charged with an impossible, terrifying, and brilliant new energy. My little sister, Riley, peeked her head out of her bedroom, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "Are they gone?" she whispered. "Were we in trouble?" "No, Riles," I said, my voice a strange, choked thing. "We're not in trouble." I looked at her, then down at the envelope, and a slow, disbelieving laugh began to bubble up from my chest. I think our troubles might be over." We sat together on our worn-out sofa, and I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a world we had never known. There were thick, formal documents printed on heavy, watermarked paper. There was a letter of acceptance into the State Paramedic and Firefighter Academy, a place I had only ever dreamed of attending. And there was a detailed breakdown of the Wallace Foundation for Civic Duty Scholarship. Full tuition, a book and uniform stipend, and a monthly living allowance that was more than I currently earned in 3 months of working 60-hour weeks. It was a king's ransom. It was a new life handed to me on a silver platter, all because of a single $10 pizza. My first act as a man with a future was to quit my past. I picked up my phone, my hands still trembling slightly, and I called my boss at the pizza shop. I told him, with the politeness he had never shown me, that I was giving him my 2 weeks' notice. He grumbled, annoyed, but I didn't care. The power he held over me, the power of a $10 an hour job, was gone forever. That Saturday, at precisely 0800 hours, I reported for duty. I stood on the doorstep of the general's home, a beautiful but surprisingly modest historic house in the city's oldest neighborhood. The man himself answered the door. He was not in his uniform. He was in a simple, comfortable-looking cardigan, and he had a warm, genuine smile on his face. "On time," he said with a nod of approval. "Excellent. The first mark of a good soldier." His home was not a mansion. It was a library, a museum of a life of service. The walls were lined with books, with framed maps of old battlefields, with photographs of him with presidents and soldiers. And in the center of his sunlit study,
A beautiful old hand-carved wooden chessboard was waiting.
Our weekly chess games became a ritual, a tradition. He was a brilliant, ruthless player, and he beat me mercilessly for the first 6 months. But he wasn't just playing a game. He was teaching me. He taught me about strategy, about foresight, about the importance of sacrificing a pawn to protect a king, or, in his world, a soldier to save a platoon. He was not just my benefactor. He had become my mentor, my commanding officer, my friend. He and his kind, gentle wife, who had been so happy to finally have some youthful energy back in their quiet home, became the grandparents that I and my sister had lost so long ago. The academy was the hardest thing I had ever done. It was a crucible of physical and mental exhaustion, designed to break you down and rebuild you into someone stronger. But for the first time in my life, I was not just working for a paycheck. I was working for a purpose. I graduated 2 years later at the absolute top of my class. The story ends on another bright, sunny afternoon, but I am not in a stuffy law office. I am standing on the sun-drenched stage of the city auditorium, dressed in the crisp, dark blue uniform of a newly certified paramedic. The room is filled with my graduating class and with our proud families. And in the front row, sitting beside my sister, Riley, who is now a happy, thriving high school student with a future as bright as the sun, is General Thomas Wallace. He is not in his uniform. He is just an old man, and his face is a picture of a profound and deeply felt pride. As I step up to the podium to give my valedictorian address, I look out at the crowd. And I think about that cold, lonely night in the pizza shop 2 years ago. I think about the tired, hungry old man and the simple $10 act of kindness that had changed my entire world. The general had not just given me a scholarship. He had given me back the future I thought I had been forced to sacrifice. He had given me a purpose. He had given me and my sister a family. He had seen something in me, a quiet sense of duty, a simple respect that I had not even seen in myself. And his belief in me had become my own. I had learned that the greatest acts of kindness are the ones we perform when we expect nothing in return. And that sometimes a single $10 pizza can be the best investment you will ever make in your entire life. An absolutely beautiful and heartwarming story about how a single act of respect can have a ripple effect that changes a life forever. What a powerful testament to the character of both men. Let us know what you think of this incredible story in the comments below. If you were inspired by Sean's journey, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more uplifting and satisfying stories. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.